Hello and welcome. Very happy again today to welcome our favorite returning guest, Pastor Siri Strommen from Atonement Lutheran Church in Bloomington, Minnesota.
You got it. The mouthful.
Hi, Siri. Thanks for joining us again.
Oh, always good to be here.
Okay, so this is something that I've struggled with as a person who I say spirituality is probably the most important thing in my life, my relationship with the divine, whatever it is. I used to be very religious. That was the most important. Mid-30s, religion didn't work for me anymore, so I kind of went off on my own spiritual path. However, I watch and read a ton of stuff, and there is definitely some shift going on with humanity. I mean, these are unprecedented times we're living in. Nothing feels familiar. It's like we're walking in an earthquake all the time, and it can be really unsettling. And I do believe in the focusing on what you want, not what you don't want.
Mm.
And a lot of spiritual belief systems say we shouldn't talk about any of this other. Just focus on the positive. There's going to be this wonderful rebirthing of humanity that's going to be all love and kindness. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying it doesn't feel right for me to not also talk about the things that are actually happening in our society, in our politics, not in a way to just bitch and complain about it, but to try and understand, at least for me.
Yep.
And because I've said this before, but I grew up in a house where there was, my father had unfortunately, addiction to alcohol, lifelong journey. When he died, I was taking care of him, loved him. That all was healed. It was a process. But anyway, so it was when you grow up in that kind of, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, that volatile home atmosphere, the biggest thing is nobody talk about it. Like crazy stuff would happen, the house would be all torn apart. We might have to run to a hotel for the night. And then the next morning we put on our Catholic school uniforms and we go to school and we sit at our desks and like nothing happened. And that always felt incredibly wrong to me. And also, as adults, now we know how damaging that is. You have to talk about things, you have to process things.
Yes.
So the thing that has been bothering me for quite some time, but after a couple conversations I've had in the last week, I'm just like, I don't get this. I really want to dissect this. And I think, Siri, you're the perfect person to talk about it with. And that is, today's Christians are so un-Christ-like. Not all of them. I always have to say, I speak in absolutes. Of course, there's some, I'm talking to one right now who is still in a Christian religion, who is really trying to live what Jesus taught. What really baffles me, and I live in a really conservative area, and this, honestly, it's heartbreaking to me. The signs these people have on their houses and lawns, huge messages of hate.
Yeah.
Feelings, make liberals cry again, just really hateful messages. Let's go, Brandon. Fuck Joe Biden. I mean, they have it on their cars, their houses. It's just hate, hate, hate. And these are the same people that their cars are in that church parking lot on Sundays, and they're bringing this country back to a God-fearing country, these Christians. It's like, this is as confusing to me as policemen that are still supporters of this MAGA movement after we watched them beat the hell out of these policemen. They lost fingers, they lost eyes, they got, bless you,
Thank
they
you.
got TBIs, but they're like, we back the blue. We back you so much, we are going to beat the hell out of you if you try and stop us from unlawfully entering a building. Like, there's so much about what's happening that to me makes absolutely no sense. But I would say probably the most confounding is this surge of Christianity. They want to turn our democracy into a theocracy, a Christian theocracy, but they follow none of Jesus's teachings. Jesus Christ. That's what Christianity is. It's followers of Christ and his teachings. But these teachings are all gone, and they have glommed on and created this Jesus, this Christianity that is all about revenge and division and hatred. And here's the thing that always gets me. You know, the abortion and the gays, that's the biggest thing. Abortion, gays, abortion, gays. Oh, this country's being ruined because of abortions and gays. I never heard of any woman who had an abortion or a gay person shooting up a school.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, but they're so focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus never mentioned anything about that. But what he did say over and over and over is, do not judge. Do not judge. Love everyone. Be as little children. I don't know how. I have some ideas about why this got so mixed up, and the Christianity today that has the biggest mouths. Like I said, I know beautiful Christians who are really trying to live the teachings of Christ within the confines of their religious beliefs still. God bless them. No problem with that. But the big mouths, the ones that are getting all the coverage, it's so hateful. And the person that they've elected to be their candidate on this side, that's all he speaks of. Is he criticizes people. He makes fun of people. Honestly, he reminds me of a 12-year-old boy, like a popular bully 12-year-old boy. Just has to put everyone down, make fun of people, and I'll get revenge, and I'll put the journalists in jail. Like, this is so un-Christ-like. I can't make it make sense in my head, except this is the one thing I've been thinking about this the last couple weeks. So I 12 years of Catholic school, and then, as I always said, till my mid-30s, very devout Catholic, went to mass every day, confession every week, taught CCD. And I remember I was pretty young at the time, but there was a priest in my parish that I knew fairly well. And I remember talking to him, and I said to him, I said, I don't understand the crucifixion of Jesus. It makes no sense to me. This man loving everybody, saying, you know, he's performing miracles for them. He is nothing but compassion and love and acceptance, and they kill him. Like, I don't get it. And he said, because he was not the savior they were wanting or waiting for, because they had been so persecuted for so long that in their heads, when this savior came, he would get revenge on their enemies. He would make them suffer. He would raise them up and watch them, you know, the people that had. And it dawned on me, this is the savior they've been waiting for. They say, fuck your feelings, because we all know processing and feeling our feelings is the key to freedom and wholeness. But you got to be vulnerable. You got to do it, and you got to heal and release them and let love fill in that space where all that anger was. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, it's definitely possible. Millions of us have done it and continue to do it. Obviously, it's not a one and done. But no, the anger, and I find the angrier someone is, the more pain they're carrying around that they don't want to get near. They don't want to touch. That's too vulnerable. It's too scary. But the anger makes them feel powerful and strong. And it's just astounding to me. And I honestly, Siri, I don't know. I don't really bother talking to people unless they actually engage me, which I did a couple of weeks ago, which I'll talk about later on. But it's like they're living in a completely different reality.
Yeah.
Even when faced with facts. There is an amazing documentary on Netflix right now. It's called the Antisocial Network. I think it's Antisocial Network, I think, and then it's got a little more. But it's really about how all this crazy stuff started, how like the Democrats are drinking baby blood and running pedophile, like all this, it's all these guys, exactly what we thought, all these women-hating young people who know how to operate computers, putting stuff out there and going, oh my God, they believe that's true. Let's try this. Let's try that. I mean, it's just astounding. And the one that was the biggest propagator of all this, all these lies, really, all this made up craziness, that had his own show. When he finally realized where it was actually coming from and that it was all made up, he said, I had to tell him, all my listeners and all the people who watch my show. So he told them, hey, none of this is true. It's all made up by these blah, blah, blah. They didn't care.
Yes.
Change a thing. Not one of them went, oh my God, this is, no, they just stopped listening to him because they figure, oh, he's lost now. He's on to the dark side. So I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think it's pretending it's not happening. At least for me, I may feel differently at some point in the future and be like, I don't want to talk about what's happening anymore. I just want to, and I do obviously want to focus on, I do believe humanity's going through a major shift, and it's going to result in a very beautiful shift. I do believe that we're going to remember more of who we really are and why we're here. But I think we're going to have to go through some things also to get there. But anyway, so Siri, you have this. It's funny. I was telling Siri, I opened my laptop this morning to do something for my website, and the first thing that popped up was this. What's the name of it, Siri? You have the name of it there.
Yeah, 10 things about Christianity that Jesus would not be happy about if he returned.
Okay, yes. All right. So let's kind of go through those a little bit and see if we can find actually use some of your theological wisdom on this. So say it again, 10 things that
10 things about Christianity that Jesus would not be happy about if he returned.
There you go. I always say that these people that are in the public eye today are just the worst ad people for him ever. Like, they turn everybody off to Christianity because it's not really based on Christ's teachings. Okay, so Siri, let's start with this. Okay, the first one is that his vision for a transformed society got twisted into an afterlife fantasy about heaven.
Yep.
Okay, so what's the theological background of that?
So Jesus really does not speak that much about heaven and hell. That is something that came much later in the church and got sort of thrust back so that when we read it, we see it. It's like we were given heaven and hell and devil and all these certain theological glasses that were put on to us so that we filter everything through that. When actually you read the 4 Gospels and Jesus comes in and says, the kingdom of heaven is here now and it's within you, meaning the reality of God, the vibration of God, the consciousness of God, the activity of God is all around us, present and within us. We just have to awaken to it. And that Jesus, in all of his parables and in all of the ways he treated other people, he was doing healing now. He was changing people and communities for the now, not so that they could go to heaven later. That wasn't a big emphasis. And so the whole afterlife thing came later, and there's people have theories about why, that it's a lot easier to control people if they think that their life is about eternal punishment or eternal joy with God. And if the church is the one place that's going to hook you up with eternal joy versus eternal conscious torment, then you're going to go to church. Instead of the kind of lack of control, more guidance of what a teacher or a church community might be, which comes together to do, and I want to say by transform society, it's a both within and without. And we'll kind of get to that with some of the other ones, that you transform yourself from the inside out. You heal yourself. You let go of your fears and your burdens and your jealousy and your resentments and your anger and your revenge and your judgment and your condemnation. Like, you slowly let that bleed out of you, and it changes you and it changes how you operate in the world. And so the changes then that are made in the world come from a much more loving, sustainable place that frankly is going to just be better for everybody at the end of the day. And he talks about these things. He talks about this with his parables of the seeds and many other parables like the Good Samaritan and the prodigal children. And yet we're focused on the black and white simplicity of, if you believe Jesus Christ died for your sins, then you get to go to heaven.
Yeah, it's you made me think of his be like little children, and little children feel what they feel and then it passes. They don't carry it around, they don't carry grudges. If they're happy, which is most of the time, that's their natural state, is joy, right? They get very happy about things. If they're mad or hurt, they let their feelings out, and then they're done with it. I want to say too, Jim Palmer wrote this because I want to make sure I give him credit. This is a list that he wrote. There's 10 things. Okay, so that was very helpful. So here's number 2. That religion was formed to worship his name instead of a movement to advance his message. This one is huge because what I remember from my teachings is Jesus said, don't worship the Pharisees and all that, and go off by yourself and connect with the Father yourself, right?
Yeah.
And we are doing exactly what he said. What he was saying is basically, I'm one of you. You can correct me if I'm wrong because you're definitely more educated about this. But from what I understood, he was saying, I am you. You are me. We are all capable of everything that I'm doing. But we didn't want to watch our thoughts or forgive our neighbors or whatever. So we made him something special that we can't really imitate, but kind of aspire to as something way up there. And if we worship, that's kind of like the golden calf. Really, it's just a human being, right? Worship that thing and maybe God will answer your prayers. But you go ahead with what you were.
Yeah. Jesus called disciples to learn from him. That's what a disciple does, is they live with their master, they watch what the master says and does, and they imitate the master. There's this great phrase from the Hebrew Jewish understanding that a disciple is someone who walks in the dust of the master. You walk behind and you learn. And the idea is basically that kind of common society is missing something. We're missing the depth and the truth of God and spirituality and faith. And to be a disciple is to be hungry enough to seek for a deeper truth. And so, but there's so much I could say about this. I'll try to keep it simple. Somehow, in the process of the church becoming powerful, Christianity stopped being about, let's gather together as a community on Sunday and try to absorb the words of Jesus to kind of get into his heart space and understand what it might feel like to be him so that we can be transformed and be more like him. To, nope, you're right. Like Jesus was completely different. We're these sucky people down here going to hell, and God's up here. And what's a God to do? Because God hates us so much. So God's going to send this unique person down here to figure out a way to bridge us. And the only thing we can do is believe in Jesus. Like that's the only thing we can do. And maybe even that we can't do. So we need the Holy Spirit. And it's this really convoluted formula that God has to figure out to avoid selling it. It always goes back to avoid sending us to hell. And in the process, then our link to salvation is Jesus and just worshiping him. And people even get upset if we talk about being Christ-like, because they're like, no, we can't, because original sin, we suck, we're bad, we're awful. There's nothing we can do to make God like us or love us. Therefore, we just, we got to praise Jesus and for the saving. And it doesn't actually make any logical sense, that argument of like why God would set it up that way. And so we have people who come together that they just think if they can love Jesus and put their hands in the air and sing about Jesus, that's it. That's the only requirement. That's what it means to be a disciple, apparently. And yet, as you've mentioned, we can see some unbelievably unconscious, violent, condemning, hateful behaviors coming from many Christians and embodying the very qualities that Jesus criticized in the Pharisees and the religious powers of the day. Um, very, yeah.
It's that's what I mean. It's mind-boggling. And I always think of this song that we used to sing uh in the church growing up. They'll know we are Christians by our love.
I know.
It's really tragic. Now I can tell a Christian by the hate that they have on their houses and on their cars and the way they talk. Um, my cousin, who is a woman of color, I love her to death, and she opens my eyes to a lot of things, but she shared something. It was a picture of, this was an older white couple, so this wasn't young and stupid. They were probably maybe in their 70s at an airport in all the red, white, and blue garb with that guy's name all over it, and their shirts said blacks for Trump. This is an old white couple. So this is such a it's such a blatant, we're making a joke out of you. We don't care if you know that we're racist, or they're like way too old to have completely missed what the most important things in life are. But I see it everywhere. It's almost like they revel in the hatred. It's like that the outrage is their fuel, their oxygen. They get outraged and fight. And my girlfriend, I have a friend whose husband is, he's got on all those channels all the time, the hate news channels that crowd all listens to. And she said so perfectly, she goes, it's like all the popular kids that were bullies in high school, and they've all got microphones now. And she goes, that's what it's like listening to them. We're the cool kids. We're the smart kids. They're all stupid. Let's make fun of them. Let's call them names. It's like unbelievable immaturity. And unfortunately, it's not just immaturity, because it actually does a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. Okay, so number 3, that the gospel says his death solved the problem of humankind's separation from God, instead of accepting that his life revealed the truth that there is no separation from God.
This is enormous. And this is going to freak Christians out, because it is so unbelievably drilled into our theology. This is very masculine theology. It is very dominant theology. It is not the only Christian theology, but it is dominant. And that is, once again, stemming back from original sin, which says, and this is not biblical, this comes from Augustine in the 4th century, 400s, where he came up with the idea that at our root, there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And we cannot save ourselves. Like, we can't do anything. Therefore, like, he even had this belief that, like, when God looks at us, God goes, ew, ew. And this belief was adopted by the Christian church. All these guys got together and said, that sounds great, Augustine. And he had some brilliant insights. I mean, he's a saint of the church. He had some really interesting ideas, but I believe he was wrong about that. Other Christians, as well as other faith traditions, I'm taking a yoga teacher training, and so I'm learning a lot about Hinduism, which has some just really beautiful things to connect with Christianity. And almost every mystic, anyone who's had a spiritual experience, whether it's came from the assistance of plant medicine or literally just a gift from God, you woke up, there's an angel standing by your bed, near-death experiences, like anyone who has pierced through the veil comes back and says the opposite of this. Mm-hmm. They say that actually God is in every single one of us, that we are deeply beloved, that what is sick about humanity is that we've bought into this belief about judgment and condemnation, and we even thrust it upon God. We took the very thing that's making us sick, violence, condemnation, and judgment, and then we threw that on God and said, that's what God wants to do to us. It's like at its very roots, the way we see God and how we think God sees us is poisoned. And I believe that Jesus challenged that. In so many of the stories, and the way he behaved towards people, he challenged that. The only people he got upset with were those in power who were abusing their responsibility, their spiritual responsibility towards people. But when he approached people who were vulnerable and in need and the bottom of society, women, children, lepers, outcasts, he always showed them the utmost compassion. He never said, well, first you have to confess all your sins to me and then maybe I will heal you. He healed them and said, and by the way, your sins are also forgiven at the same time. Like, you didn't ask for it, but I gave it to you because that's how it is. It's just how it is. Like, that's the relationship that you have. The separation from God that we have is in our mind. It's in our perception. It does not come from God. And Jesus and every other great leader that has ever lived on this planet says the exact same thing. And yet it has been a dominant thread. You can feel how passionate I am about this. It has been a dominant voice over and over again, preached from pulpits over and over and over again, that says God is up here, pissed off at everything we're doing. We're down here sucking it up. And the only thing that's going to bridge that gap is Jesus. And the qualification for that varies depending on denomination.
Yeah.
And that's not what Jesus said. That's not what he said. I'll just say one more thing. The word in the Gospels, because people will go, well, Pastor Siri, Jesus talked about coming and removing sin and salvation. The original word for salvation is healing and wholeness and connection with God. And again, so Jesus comes to make us aware of that which is. He's come to remove the ignorance and take the blinders off of our eyes. In that way, he's giving us salvation, but really it's already there. It's literally like someone put blinders on and handed you a present, but you didn't know what was in your hands. And so Jesus comes and takes off the blinders, and then you see it and you're like, I have this gift, I have this present. You always did. You just couldn't see it. And the belief that we're separate from God and the symptoms of what happens after the fact that we believe that we're separate from God and one another is what we call sin. But it's not, it's the aftermath. It's like, I get sick and so I cough, but we're focusing on the coughing. We're not focusing on the cause, that I have a virus. So the church talks so much about everyone coughing over each other. Cover your cough. Or, we don't talk about the fact that we have a virus that is telling us that we're awful and causing all this judgment, condemnation, and saying God hates you, you're separate from God. It's this whole mentality that's just made us so sick. And when that's removed, when people experience the opposite, because they do, that God is in us, that God is right here and has never left us, that creates such healing and such joy and such bliss. That's what the religious teachers are trying to help us move towards.
Well, people say a lot like, well, we don't know. And a lot of that is true. It's faith, it's belief. But there are people who have had direct experience, near-death experience. I mean, there's millions and millions of them who say when they got to the other side, there was nothing but love. There was no judgment, no condemnation. And my experience a few weeks ago with Kundalini awakening, same thing. All this judgment and all that. And let's get right down to the point, which is fear is a good way to control people. And
Yep.
if you can keep them afraid and controllable, you can get very rich off of that.
Yep.
And many, many religions continue to this day. And now all these new evangelical preachers with their mega $1 million churches and jets and all that, people are getting very rich off of keeping people afraid. And when people are afraid, they're angry. And when they're angry, they want someone to direct their anger to. So they also give them that. Here's where you can get angry at. And they're completely blind to the way they're being controlled and call everybody else sheeps. It's an amazing thing. Okay, so we're going to go, I think I'm going to do two at a time just because
Yeah, we got to move.
Yeah, 'cause we got a lot here. So let's do 4 and 5 together. That the religion bearing his name was conceived by the theories and doctrines of Paul instead of the truth Jesus lived and demonstrated. 5, that he was said to exclusively be God in the flesh, exclusively, putting his example out of reach rather than teaching that we all share in the same spirit that empowered his character and life. We kind of covered that one already. Let's do 6, that the religion that claims his name teaches that his wisdom and teachings are the only legitimate way to know truth and God. Boy, is that big. Everyone's religion is
Absolutely.
the right religion and everyone else is wrong. Anne Lamont has my favorite quote about this. She always says, you can tell you've made God in your own image if he hates all the same people you hate. And
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
everywhere today, right?
Absolutely. I just want to briefly touch on 4 about Paul. And Paul had an amazing 180 in his life. He had an amazing observation that all of the education, all of the uh, accolades according to the world, like according to the world, he had won. He'd won everything. Like he was this highly educated Jewish man who was also a Roman citizen. He could go anywhere and everywhere and get reverence. He had won. And yet, when he discovered with his Damascus experience that he had missed something fundamental about who God was, it crushed him. And he realized that all of like the external things that you're told to be and believe and all the ways we pat ourselves on the back and try to succeed, you can still utterly miss the point of life. And so that's why he did this whole like it's about grace, it's about faith, it's not about who you are, it's about God's love. And there's something to that, absolutely. Like he gave a brilliant observation, but it is an interesting point that so much of what we teach about the church, and this is even true of Lutheranism, because Martin Luther got so much of his insight from reading Paul, um, that there's such a focus on Pauline theology exclusively that some of the actual theologies that come out of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as gospels almost get lost. And Paul really, really did focus on Jesus being something like the Christ, right? Being this, he didn't ever talk about Jesus as parables or teachings. It was sort of like what Jesus represented in a cosmic way. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but Paul really didn't balance that out. So moving on, because yeah, we do have to move a little quicker here. Um, this idea of exclusivity is something Jesus did not say. Even in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Anyone who comes through me, that's what everybody loves to go to. They're like, but Pastor
Mhm.
Siri, what about the
Yeah.
Gospel of John? This book has deep mystical teachings. And remember what I said earlier about every spiritual teacher and people who've had powerful experiences who realize there's no separation between themselves and God, that God lives in them. They always come back with the realization that says, oh my gosh, I am an incarnation of God. But so are you. So is everybody. So therefore we are connected. We are to love and serve each other. Like I serve you because you're an incarnation of God. You serve me. It brings humility. It brings love. It brings service. It brings kindness. It brings grace. It isn't a thing about arrogance, right? Like I'm the only one. And yet somehow when we said that Jesus was the only one to do that, it was a misconception. Then it says that truth can't be found anywhere. Salvation, healing, all of the stuff in the world cannot be found anywhere else, that only somehow through this one particular avenue, and thus the church. Um, and to me, it's so small-minded. It's how is God that little that God's like, well, I'm just going to put all of my eggs in one basket. And if you don't buy the basket, go to hell with you. It's so bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. And again, Jesus did not put the emphasis on himself. He always put the emphasis on who God was. He was just revealing that. And he wanted other people to have that awareness as well. He was trying to get them to see what he was seeing. So he's basically the way, the truth, and the life is the connection with God. That's what it is. So when you have that yourself, you found the way, the truth, and the life. It's a universal path, and any guru can get you there. And for me, Jesus is my guru who helps make sure that I'm on the path. But I'm sure not going to say to other people walking on their path that they're wrong, because only God knows what they need.
See, you just touched on something really important there, and that is the training in religions is now it's up to you to go out and save others and bring them into our fold, because more people means more money, more power for them. My religion, I've said this a minute, the Catholic religion is one of the largest holders of real estate in the world. They're worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. There's a reason for that. They want people coming in. They want them putting their money in the basket. They want them to believe they need to go to that building on Sundays in order to be blessed and holy and sacred. Because if people ever realize that's just their training, they don't necessarily need to do that. It gives you comfort, and it feels right, aligned with your soul, by all means. But if you're doing it because you're afraid if you don't, there's a God that's going to send you to hell because you didn't go to church, that's programming. That's not actual truth. Certainly not any truth I've experienced in what I've had when I've been blessed to have these incredible moments. And like I said, go on YouTube. There's millions of people who have had near-death experiences, and not one of them said, I got to the other side and God was like, listen, you little asshole, you didn't do anything I told you to do. You're going to, like, doesn't exist. That's all made up in order to keep us controllable, to keep us giving money, to keep us afraid. Fear. Look at the media. Everything is fear. Why do you think that is? Because if you can make people afraid, you can control them. We do it with our kids. It's terrible parenting, but we do it. And I shouldn't say terrible. Sometimes you have to. I mean, especially when your kids are little, sometimes you just got to make them afraid of something to get them to do what's right or to keep them safe. But yeah, fear is it's perfect way to control people, and to have created religions where fear of this God in the sky is the basis. Brilliant marketing, I gotta say. Horrible for humanity, but good for their bank accounts. Okay. Okay, the next one. The idea that humankind stands condemned before God and deserving of divine wrath and eternal conscious judgment, requiring the death of Jesus to fix it. Kind of cover that. Yep. That people are waiting on Jesus to return to save the world and end suffering, rather than taking responsibility for saving the world and solving suffering ourselves. This is a huge one, because there are people who actually believe, like, they want things to blow up. They want people to fight. It's like they're bringing on the what is it? Why can't I think of
Apocalypse?
Apocalypse, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's the apocalypse, and God's gonna come on his mighty horse and slay. It's a story. It's a story. Anyone who has had any kind of direct experience with divine, the other side of the veil, none of that exists. But it's a very good way to fuel your anger and keep yourself in judgment of others, because I'm holy, they're not. It's a spiritual superiority. That's a great drug, man. I was on it for a long time. Oh, God bless them. Oh, I said this, I think it was in one of my daily inspirations, that in one of my meditations, one of the wisdoms that came through to me was a need to feel spiritually superior often masquerades as concern. Boy, is that true. Yet I need to save you. I'm just worried that you're not going to go to heaven or whatever, because I have the answers. I'm on the right path. It's spiritual superiority. And I have definitely, when I was a religious person, of course, Catholic, that was the only religion. That was the right religion.
Yeah.
We tolerated the other religions, but that's how you're trained to believe. They want loyal followers because, give them. Okay.
Well, and I do.
You got something to say about that one? Okay,
yeah.
go.
I mean, I do want to mention that, like, even the conversations we're having right now of the frustration we have with the church, Like I wrestle with my own humility and wanting to make sure that I'm always emptying out so that I can continue to receive what is the original message of Jesus? What is that original message? And I see how the church has harmed people and is harming people with the controlling religion. So I do not want, and I know I have in the past have had that superiority piece. But even now, I continue to check myself, as we all should. So I don't want people to mistake that somehow in this conversation, um, that us calling out some of the controlling and dominating and harmful theologies and behaviors of the church means that we feel superior to them. I just think
Not
that's
on our good days. There's times I still
yeah.
catch myself. I'm
I
like, oh
know,
my God, yeah.
I know.
And
I mean,
I'm
it's
not perfect. I say I'm not perfect.
exactly.
I'm always working on it.
Exactly. So the one thing I will say about the whole saving the world thing, that Jesus is coming back, I recently read again through all the New Testament letters at my church, and I was really overwhelmed by the almost obsessive focus they had on Jesus coming back. So much of what they taught and how they behaved came from the very deep belief that Jesus was literally going to come back any minute. And it shaped so much of what they thought. And this comes from a Jewish perspective of the Messiah. So, the Jewish perspective of the Messiah is that the Messiah can usher in the end times. And some people even think Jesus might have believed this, possibly, because if that's the belief that shaped you and grown up with, it's really hard to let that go. And so there was a crisis in the church when 10, 20, 30 years were going by and there was no Jesus. 40, 50, 60 years going by, no second coming. And here we are 2,000 years later, and it's very possible for us that we can relax. Good grief. We can relax that belief because what does it change anyway? There's been so much focus on the book of Revelation and on the second coming of Jesus. So many people have written about it. Augustine himself wrote The City of God. Um, it's been speculative. A lot of it has been proved to be wrong. It doesn't change our circumstance on earth. It doesn't seem to matter at all. If Jesus is coming back tomorrow or in 25,000 years from now or never, what does it matter? The Christian faith was never about that. It wasn't preparing us for the second coming. It was about, like we said, realizing that we're living in a world where we're stuck and we literally see the world and religion and ourselves and everything through a filter of separation, worthlessness, shame, fear. Um, and when we're able to see through that to the truth and the reality of the harmony and the love and the unity of God, it's life changing. And we, why, as the most conscious, I should say, as conscious beings on this planet who've been able to affect the planet more than any other being, that seems to give us a massive responsibility with how we live with each other and how we affect the planet and all living things in the planet. And to me, it shows a deep immaturity that we cannot rise to the occasion and say that we will be good and loving caretakers of this planet and of one another. And I think we're capable of it because we know that people can heal. We know that people can go from very traumatized, revengeful people to much more loving, forgiving people. We know it's possible. And so putting our focus rather on that healing that we need collectively as humanity and how then we relate to and care for this earth and making more heaven on earth. And last thing I'll say about this, but in the prayer of Jesus that he teaches, he says, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." How did we miss that?
Mm-hmm.
And who's the channel? We're the channel. How does more heaven come to earth? Through us, through our words, through our actions, through our deeds. We're the channel. We're the bridge between heaven and earth right now. We're the conscious ones who can connect with God and live on this planet. The angels can't do it for us. We're here on earth incarnate for a reason. Yeah, okay. That's all I'm going to say about that.
No, I do agree with everything you say. And another thing I find really fascinating is you can, on both sides of what's happening in the United States right now, is they'll have the same picture or whatever, but they're saying this is the Antichrist. They're saying this is the Antichrist. You know, both believe that they're on the righteous path, say. So here's how I look at that, because I also, you know, as a human being, you know, I believe what I believe, and I can get in that thing where I'm thinking this is right. And I got to go, okay, wait a second. We all have to remember we believe what we believe because we were born where we were born, raised by the people we were raised with, had the life experience we had. There's a quote about it. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but you'd believe the same things these other people believe if you had their life experience, were born where they were born, blah, blah, blah. Those of us who, like for me, it wasn't a plan, just through life events kind of shot me out of traditional religion and onto this other path, which I'm so grateful for. I absolutely love it. But I would never in a million years start telling people who there's so many people in my family that I love. I have a huge family that are still very traditional. I wouldn't in a million years feel like it's my job to sit and talk to them and tell them why following the religious beliefs they believe are wrong. I would never, no, I wouldn't do that. But here's what I will say, because, you know, that Buffalo Springfield song, For What It's Worth, if everybody's right, nobody's right if everybody's wrong or whatever. But this is what I say, and this comes back to one of Jesus's quotes, which is, by their fruits you will know them.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I kind of hang on. It's what I hung on to when I was going through my metamorphosis out of traditional religion. And my feeling is, if your beliefs are teaching you to hate other people, to ostracize them, to feel superior to them, to promote division as opposed to unity, that's no kind of God I've ever experienced in the rare times that I have been graced with feeling of that direct connection. That's no kind of God that anyone who's had near-death experiences have. I'm not saying some of them have witnessed hell or whatever, but they never. I've been watching and listening to these since I was a teenager, and have never heard anyone say, "Oh yeah, there was a God there, and he judged me," and he never. That is all made up. And if the beliefs that you're following are teaching you to hate your fellow human beings and bully them and cause them call them names and be abusive to them and not accepting of them, and I know this is hard to digest, but whatever this God is you believe in, created everybody. Created everybody. That includes people who look different than you, who have different belief systems than you, who love people that you don't think they should be loving. As long as they're not harming you, let them be. Let them be. I have no problem with other people believing in traditional religions, as long as they don't start telling people who do not have traditional love interests that they are bad and wrong and want to beat them up or kill them or take away their rights, or that they don't want to tell women what they can and can't do with their own bodies. I mean, go on and on and on and on. So to me, that's the defining characteristic on the two sides of I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. If we're going to talk about spiritual alignment, if we're going to talk about connection with this divine source, I believe something created us. I don't have any answers for it. I know it's beyond description and just filled with a love that is just incredible. And I could never get on board with your version, not you. I'm other people's version that encourages you to hate and put hateful things on your house and your cars and call people names and beat them. over a good cause, whatever it is you've been fed that you believe is your good cause that gives you the right to cause physical harm and emotional abuse to other people, sorry, that I don't, that's not coming from anything divine. That's coming from someone's agenda, is benefiting off of your loyalty and probably benefiting in their bank account. That's my 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. Should we get the last two here?
Let's get the last two and we're done. All right. Let's see if we might have covered them. Let's see. That people think there is magical potency in uttering the name of Jesus rather than accessing our own natural powers and capabilities to affect change. I think you might have already, did you mention that already? Maybe not. Maybe I just read it. That people have come to associate Jesus with church, theology, politics, and power rather than courage, justice, humanity, beauty, and love.
Yeah, you know, there's sort of a movement right now in more progressive Christianities that are just saying, look, if you actually read the Gospels, Jesus is woke and he has empathy, he has compassion, he reaches out to people across whatever social lines the society and the church, even the faith structure of the day, believed was okay and believed was kosher. He didn't actually come to start a religion. He really wanted to affect people's inner sense of God and inner sense of themselves and to change the way they saw the world. And yet it is sad because we do have people who won't go to church for a good reason, because when they hear Jesus and the church and Christianity, they think about, you know, some of these things we've been talking about of you have to go in, you have to believe the right thing, controlling in thought, sometimes controlling in behavior, dress, no questions, no doubt, no room for being a human being. I heard something really powerful, and I'm not going to remember who said it, but it was a quote that said, spiritual and religious harm is when having a normal human experience and reacting with normal human reactions is seen as sinful and wrong.
I like that. Where did that come
Yeah.
from?
I'd have to look it up, but I took a spiritual and religious trauma course last fall, and
Oh,
there's some
right.
beautiful people who've
Yeah.
done beautiful work on it. And think that's powerful when you're having a normal human experience and you're reacting in a normal human way. And then you're told you're sinful and God hates you and you need to, you know, believe in the right person or go through X, Y, and Z in order to not be thrown into hell. That is coming off from such an awful, awful place versus a completely different way of looking at it, which is we are here on this planet to learn. We are expected to make mistakes. Everything that we do and say is an opportunity to learn about ourselves and about God. And the entire time we're going through this life experience, God is beside us, ready for guidance, ready to offer us love and grace, ready to cheer us along, waiting for our maturing and our growth, and clapping with every instrument, you know, with every moment that we learn something new. And there's never judgment. We can mess up so bad, and God completely understands how hard this life is. God completely understands where all of us are coming from. And if we want to take responsibility for our life, it is to learn from those experiences and let them inform us how to become more compassionate and empathetic for ourselves and for other people. And when we start going on that path of really feeling like, I'm okay, I'm okay, that healing that we experience for ourselves and that empathy we can experience for other people, it's life changing.
Yeah. Amen. Okay. I guess the last thing I want to say is sometimes I can get caught up too in like the outrage or whatever. But one thing that's really been helping me lately, you know, I had this great meditation time one morning and everything was all butterflies and roses. And then I'm going to the store and I'm behind a car with all their because it's like I said, the area I live, all their hateful stuff on the car, and I was just like, oh. And then I just had this realization, like, you poor soul, you
Mm.
poor soul. What I see now is all these people with these people are so filled with pain. Doesn't mean we excuse their behavior. Doesn't mean they get a free pass. Makes it understandable, not acceptable. But I don't want to hate anyone. And I did find myself sometimes like, so what's the point of what I'm doing if I'm putting hate in the world, but I just think it's on the right side? It's like, it's ridiculous. So how do we bridge this gap? How do we mend this? How do we introduce some kind of love, compassion in here? And that is it. And I'll tell you, a lot of the people I know personally that support this man that I feel just spews such hatred and division, have really tragic stories to tell. Their
Mm.
childhoods filled with abuse,
Mhm.
assault,
Mhm.
neglect.
Mhm.
So all that pain, we're not taught as human beings how to process our pain at all. Very little of that. Suck it up. And what happens is our pain turns to anger, and we turn it into a more aggressive emotion because that feels more powerful. We don't want to be out in this dangerous world with all these vulnerable emotions, running us. So we stuff those down and cover them with all this anger and aggression and stuff. And what I find is the ones that are most aggressive, most angry, that I know personally, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's probably true for everyone, is the ones who have the most pain and tragedy inside of them. And that does help me from not just returning these hateful emotions with hate. Like I said, doesn't make it acceptable. Doesn't mean that, we just want to give them a cookie and say, okay, let's be nice to each other and everything's fine. They're still responsible for their actions and the consequences of those actions. However, I don't think hating that, I mean, the meeting hate with hate,
Right.
more hate. Not saying I can always do it. I'm far from saintly, but I can do it more often than I used to be able to. And when I do, it just feels better. I just feel more like I'm on the side I want to be in, which is on the side of love, inclusion, compassion, tolerance. And if you want to call me names for being that, not you, obviously, but if people call me names, as they do, we all know the names they call us. That's like, I'm fine with that. Believe me, I've been called worse and for stupider reasons. I'll take whatever names you want to call me because I want everyone to be loved and accepted and included in this society. And if the way you choose to live your life is not hurting other people and it only includes other adults that are consenting, God bless you. You have
Yeah.
every right. This is the thing people forget. There's a whole group of people that think they're in charge and they have a right to tell everyone else how to live. And you don't. Sorry to break it to you. You don't. We were all put here by the same mysterious creator, however we got here. We all have just as much right to live our lives the way we choose to live them without interference from other people. As long as I'm not talking about harming your beliefs that you've been trained to believe that what we're doing is wrong. I'm talking about as long as we are not physically harming you or obstructing you from your freedoms and living the way you want to live. Everyone's got that same right. Hard for a lot of people to swallow because they've been told they're the judge and jury of society, but we were all created by the same, excuse me, mysterious force, and we all have just as much right to be here as everybody else. So, Siri, please tell people if there's a few things you want to say in closing and also where they can find out more about you and the work you do.
Yeah, I guess in closing, I will say is that I'm really working to not criticize people, but rather to criticize systems and thought patterns that are destructive. And for me, destructive is the fruits. You can see it if somebody is being crippled in any way, shape, or form by their beliefs or the beliefs of other people, and so that they cannot live their full self in joy and healing, that is destructive, and I do not believe it is of God. And so that is what motivates me to talk in the way that I talk. So that being said, you can find me. I have also a YouTube channel, Siri Strommen, and my webpage is siristrommen.com, and you can come find me there.
All right. Well, till next time, Siri, once again, thank you so much for your insight and your beautiful spirit.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.